Did you have some experiences then with near death that didn't quite pull you over, but gave you pause to what you were doing, or?
Well, I don't think I went that far down the road, but basically I had, well, when I was young, I got knocked over by a car and just bounced off the car, basically. A minor bruise, if that, but I ended up being shunted probably about 15 meters down the road. And later, but actually now it's 32 years ago nearly, I had a really bad car crash. And whilst the start of the crash was happening, I became very detached and I was above my head. And I remember quite clearly the word saying, doesn't matter, you'll only spin the car. Well, it more than spin the car, it hit a lamppost at about 70 miles an hour and pulled it out of the ground, and it folded under the car, through the car, and over the top. So, and my front seat, the front two bolts that hold the seat on into the car, they broke. I tipped back and went into the back seat. So I only had my femur and my tibia broken, plus a broken nose, and a few other bruises and everything else, basically. But the lamppost was there in front of me in the car when I sort of woke up, and it was there. So I think I was a bit lucky there, basically.
Well, I like
Uh,
how they're like, oh, you're only going to spin a bit, and you're like, no, I broke some bones. The assessment on the
well,
other side is always so like, oh, it's nothing, and you're like, for the physical body, it's something. Anyway, go ahead.
well. Also, the interesting thing is when they put me into the actually, no, there was two things that happened. One, I thought of a line from Monty Python's Life of Brian, which without the expletive was "you lucky bugger," and the second one was, "Oh, so this is what it's like to break a leg. That's interesting." And those are really strange thoughts, aren't they? So,
Yeah, I've had that experience as well when I injure myself. There's a part that emerges and it's like, oh, you can't use your left hand now. Well, that's interesting. It's like there's this fascination of how we're going to function differently. I've had a touch of that experience. Um, and it's the human self. It's like, no, it's not interesting. This isn't interesting. Stop being excited about it. Well, yeah, but these things seem to be more like supporting you in your journey. Like, yes, you were lucky in that, like, 'cause if your lamppost strapped around your car, 70 miles an hour, this is a big deal. Anybody else would have, it would have been over. And
well,
that's a bit of them
yeah,
holding you in a space of saying, that container keeping you safe.
yeah. Interestingly enough, there was the ambulance drivers said people don't survive this usually because if they survive the initial crash, they get crushed by the lamppost. So that was one thing. That was an interesting comment. And then 2 weeks later, an off-duty policeman did exactly the same thing, and he left the planet. So that was another quite interesting thing. Literally 2 weeks later. So it was, yeah. I think at the end of the day, we things like accidents like this are designed to make us more aware of what's happened and things that are part of the greater reality, because being detached from the body whilst it was happening, and I've always been interested in metaphysics anyway, as you'll probably find out when we do the preamble at the start of the interview itself. But being in a position where you're out of the body and just seeing it happen and it being okay, that's fine, and not a problem, is quite a, it's almost as good as the going down the Hara line, which is the light, the tunnel that you go down back into the energetic towards your higher self or true energetic self. It's almost as an eye opener as that, and as profound as that, because you suddenly realise that this isn't me. This is just something I'm using, and I think that's what makes the direction that we go into from a metaphysical or spiritual way more robust, because we've got this evidence, so to speak, that is part of our framework or our foundation that means that we've got something we can start with, then we can move on from there, and then everything else just follows basically.
Well, was your experience of popping out of your body in that instance, because you've been doing meditation, like I'm wondering what the relationship was, because you've been doing a meditation, have been having out of body experiences or otherworldly experiences, and I'm wondering how that crash and popping out of your body, was that like, oh, I'm back here again, this is where I go when I'm meditating, or was it a different experience?
Well, it was before I started to meditate again properly. But
Oh,
but it wasn't before. I mean, I used to do astral traveling quite a lot when I was sleeping, basically. So I knew where I was, but it just seemed very natural. It was just okay, I'm here now, and that was it. But it was a few seconds that felt like forever, basically, and then obviously the impact happened, and then I'll sort of, oh, okay, there's a lamppost in my car. What's it doing there? Along
well,
with the other thought process.
right. All the other thoughts that came screaming forward, I'm sure. Well, it's kind of it was sort of like this Neil thing of like this is where you are when you do astral, and this is where you are when you leave the body. So there's a commonality, a familiarity, and it creates a through line, from that physical point between the two, two different ways of exiting, but it's the same place. And so I imagine there was a through line in the mind of like, oh yeah, this is. But in that instance, though, if you said that a few moments felt like forever, which is probably quite different. You probably, yeah, what was that like for you in that moment of just hanging out above?
Well,